Welcome back to The Dilemma Part 2, where we're looking at Adnan Syed and whether he's innocent or guilty. If you have stumbled across this video without watching my first one, definitely check that out first, just to make sure you know about all of the facts before you formulate your own opinion. I am Opinionated Livia and I talk a lot about anything and everything that I find interesting. If you enjoy what I have to say and you're on the same wavelength as me, don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe. So now, let's get into the 5 reasons that point to Adnan being guilty. And like I said, I mean no disrespect to anyone. This is just what I've researched and it is for educational purposes only. Point 1. The breakups. Adnan and Hae would go on to have 2, both of which would be of Hae's choice. In the first breakup, Hae decided to break up with Adnan in November. She started to have feelings for her co-worker Don, and this alongside the religious beliefs caused her to end things. After their first breakup, and according to one of Hae's old teachers, Hae had asked her to help her avoid Adnan, who was waiting for her after class. And from Hae's own words in her diary, she had written Adnan wasn't taking things well. She wrote how he was acting like the world was going to end and he didn't respect her boundaries or her decision. In a Serial podcast interview, Adnan claims he wasn't overly upset about the breakup. However, there is evidence to contradict this. After their first breakup, Hae wrote Adnan a note to say, "I'm really annoyed that the situation is going the way it is. You know people break up all the time. Your life is not going to end. You'll move on, I'll move on, but apparently you don't respect me enough to accept my decision." Adnan showed the note to a classmate and at the back he had written, "I'm going to kill." Right, so it doesn't explicitly say he's going to kill Hae, however you can kind of connect the dots here. The pair did get back together on December the 3rd, but by December the 6th, Hae was writing about Don again. And by December the 22nd, Hae decided she needed to break up with Adnan again, so she did. She told a friend she broke up with Adnan because she started to have feelings for another guy. And Adnan told the health teacher they broke up because it gets too crowded with 3 people. And according to one of Adnan's friends, Stephanie, she said that the second breakup completely blindsided Adnan. On December the 23rd, Hae was in a minor car accident and she called Adnan from her workplace, asking if he could come to the mall and look at her car. This would be the first time that Adnan and Don would meet. Don has gone on to say that the encounter was very normal, it was fine. And Adnan's friend Stephanie said that he was okay with Hae and Don dating because, quote, he didn't threaten his manhood and he believed that Don was a step down. Hae and Adnan did remain friends and Hae would talk about Don to Adnan all the time. On December the 31st, Hae drove Adnan to the car store so he could pick up his car. But she didn't wait for him. Instead, she went to see Don. And it's not clear how Adnan felt about this. But on January the 1st, this would be the last time that Hae would write about Adnan in her diary. After the Christmas break, school resumed on the 4th of January. And Adnan was absent from school. He was avoiding seeing Hae. And on Hae's last night alive, Adnan called her every 30 minutes until he got through. As we know, Hae was speaking to Don. So Adnan got through to her around 12:35 a.m. and this is when he claimed that Hae asked him if they'll ever get back together. At 7:45 a.m. the next morning, Adnan was unusually early to school and he asked Hae for a ride even though he didn't need it. So sadly, 12 days after Hae was in a new relationship, she was murdered. With this, there's definitely motive for Adnan. Hae broke his heart. She told him she didn't love him anymore and she didn't want to be with him. He felt rejected and jealous. Point 2. Possessive. It is said that Adnan was possessive and controlling throughout their relationship, and this is something Hae would write about in her diary. "No more feeling bad about myself, hating myself because of one person. Although my heart will always love him, I have lost the things I enjoyed so much, like hanging around with Aisha. It seems to shoot through Adnan's heart. It seems like my life has been revolving around him. Where's me? How did I end up like this? I have completely changed myself to make him happy. Everything that bothered him, I tried to change. Why do I do that? What's a love if someone has to change themselves to receive it?" Also, one of Hae's best friends, Debbie Warren, has said, Adnan was very overprotective of Hae. He never made her sustain from seeing her friends, but he did suggest she spend more time with him. He wanted to know where she was going, when she was going, who she was with, almost like a father. And Hae's other best friend Aisha has said, "He kind of just always genuinely annoyed me because just the constant paging her if she was out. And he's like, well, I just wanted to know where you were. And it's like, I told you where I was going to be. If she was at my house and we were having a girls' night, he would stop by. I walk over and try and hang out. And it's like, have some space." It's one of those things. At first, it's like, oh, cute, your boyfriend's dropping by. But by the 10th time, it's like, really? That said, this doesn't prove that Adnan is the killer, but being possessive and controlling doesn't really shed a good light. Point 3. Adnan's cell phone location. And this one's a little bit controversial, and I'll explain why. Adnan claims he was not near Leakin Park. However, his phone pinged off the cell phone tower in the early evening. The prosecutors believe that there is no reasonable explanation for the pings other than his phone was near there. There is a period of time during the day that Adnan does not account for, and his cell phone pings off the tower. So this helped the prosecution to illustrate a possible narrative of what happened. The call logs from Adnan's cell phone shows a call with Nisha at 3:32 p.m. on January the 13th, and the call lasted 2 minutes and 22 seconds. This call is definitely suspicious. So Nisha is a friend of Adnan and they do not know Jay. So Adnan claims that he lent Jay his car and he left his mobile in the glove compartment. He had lent Jay the car from 12 p.m. to 5 p.m. and they did not see each other during these times. So this points to Adnan making the call rather than Jay and contradicts his timeline. So one possible explanation is Adnan and Jay had been together at this time. However, Adnan said he was at track. And another theory is that Jay accidentally made the phone call. So like, you know, sometimes when you sit on your phone and then you accidentally call people, that's the theory there, which I'm kind of not sure how plausible that is. So for Adnan's cell phone locations, there are reasons for and against his guilt, and I will cover against his guilt in a bit. Right, so for guilty, Hae is believed to have been buried around 6:30 and 8 p.m. on the 13th of January 1999. At 7:09 and 7:16 p.m, there were 2 incoming calls to Adnan's cell phone, which was allegedly located at Leakin Park, where Hae was buried. But this point is kind of weak, because there are now concerns about the reliability about the cell phone data, which I'll explain in my Innocence section. Point 4. Adnan's foggy memory and no alibi. So Adnan only remembers things before and after the murder. In Adnan's first trial, he said at 3 p.m. on the 13th of January, he was fixing his car with a friend Dion at school. At Adnan's first trial, he told his defence lawyer that he did indeed call Nisha at 3:30 p.m. However, he later changed this to say he didn't, as Jay had his cell phone. And Adnan claims at 4 p.m. he was at track practice. And for 5 p.m. onwards, he said he doesn't really remember, but he was probably at the mosque because it was Ramadan. And Adnan remembers a call from the police at 6:24 p.m. asking if he had seen Hae, because he said he wouldn't forget something like that. So remember, Adnan had asked Hae for a ride after school. But if he had track at 4 and she had to pick up her cousin at 3:15, why would he ask for a ride? It is unclear whether Hae said no, because obviously she had to pick up her younger cousin. But Adnan's story is definitely a bit sus. When Adnan originally spoke to the police at 6:24 on the 13th of January, he said that Hae had agreed to give him a lift, but she left because he was running late. Again, just pointing out, why would she agree to give him a lift if she had to pick up her cousin at 3:15 and he had track at 4 p.m. And a few weeks later, Adnan contradicted this. He said that he didn't ask Hae for a lift and he didn't see her after school. So a lot of people believe that Adnan did ask Hae for a lift because it was all a ploy to get time with her alone. And during this period, this is when he would have killed her. So Adnan says it was just a normal day. It was like any other day. That's why he doesn't really remember his whereabouts. It is worth noting that he doesn't have a concrete alibi between 2:15 and 4 p.m. And this would have been around the time that Hae would have given him a lift. Point 5. Asia's alibi. Asia McLean says that she was with Adnan at 2:15 on the 13th of January 1999 in the school library, and they spoke for around 15 to 20 minutes. This is around the time that prosecutors say that Hae was murdered. And Asia would write 2 letters to Adnan in prison asking if he remembered talking to her that day. She said that she also contacted Adnan's lawyer at the time to let her know, but she was never called as a witness. Apparently, this is because Asia's versions of events didn't match up to Adnan's. Originally, Adnan didn't record the library encounter and said he had been alone waiting for track to start. And in a serial podcast, Asia explained that she remembers the day because it was snowing. There was a snowstorm on the 8th of January, not the 13th, so maybe she got the days confused. Let's say Asia is telling the truth. There still would have been time for Adnan to commit the crime. So now, here are 5 possible reasons to show Adnan's innocence. Point 1. Adnan's cell phone locations. And I know I put this in the guilty section, but like I said, it's controversial because there's evidence for and against. So the prosecutors believe that Hae was buried between 6:30 and 8 p.m. on January the 13th, 1999. So let's take a look at where Adnan's cell phone was during this time. And I apologise if this gets a bit confusing. I'm going to try and explain this as simply as possible. So as we know, at 6:24 p.m, an incoming call from Detective Adcock was made to Adnan, and it lasted around 4 minutes and 15 seconds. And Adnan's cell phone was located at Jay's mutual friend Kathy's apartment. So Jay knew Kathy through a friend, but Adnan and Kathy didn't know each other. So Jay said that he and Adnan were at McDonald's, but he later changed this to being at Kathy's apartment and they were both leaving. Kathy confirms this, and she said that Adnan left after the call and Jay followed. They both sat in Adnan's car for a bit before driving off. So the cell phone records show that Jay picked up Adnan from track, and then they have both confirmed that they smoked weed at Kathy's house between 5:40 and 6 p.m. At 6:59 p.m, Adnan's cell phone calls Yeza, and the call lasts around 27 seconds. Yeza was actually later identified as the person who had anonymously tipped off the police into looking into Adnan, thinking that's a little bit suspicious. So the cell phone location was in the Woodlawn area. Adnan's father testified that Adnan was at a religious service from 7:30 p.m. to 10:30 p.m. But Jay Wild claims after they left cafes, they went to Jay's house to collect some shovels. And then they would go to 170 Park and Ride to collect Hae's car. Jay then claims he went to McDonald's, which was close to the school, and waited for Adnan, who arrived 20 minutes later. But then the cell phone records contradict Jay's statement. At 6:59 p.m, the cell phone pings off a tower near Adnan's house and mosque, not Jay's house. So at 7 p.m, Adnan's cell phone pages Jen, still in the Woodlawn area. And Adnan has said that he's pretty sure that he had his phone after track, but his memory is so vague. He said he remembers dropping off Jay and then he went to the mosque. And Jay says that he was supposed to meet his friend Jen at 7. So he used Adnan's cell phone to page her from Leakin Park. So possibly Adnan doesn't remember letting Jay borrow his car and cell phone while he was at the mosque. His memory's really foggy because he was so high. Remember, he was at Kathy's house with Jay, just, smoking loads of green. Again, the cell phone records contradict Jay's story. The location of the cell phone was in the Woodlawn area, not Leakin Park. In Jay's version of events, he has him with Adnan's car, but not with Adnan at 7 p.m. So how can he page Jen if Adnan was calling Yeza at 6:59 p.m? Jay testified that Adnan drove him to Jay's house where they would get the shovels, and they put these into Adnan's car. Adnan got into Hae's car and Jay followed Adnan for 45 minutes until they got to Leakin Park. So by Jay's version of events, this would mean Adnan and Jay were in two separate cars at 7 p.m, which goes against his story. 7:09 p.m, Amerson Avenue near Leakin Park. Adnan's cell phone receives an incoming call, possibly from Jen. Adnan says he was at mosque, but Jay says he and Adnan were digging up Hae's grave. And Jen called. Allegedly, Adnan answered and told Jen they were busy and hung up, but their concerns over the reliability over the cell phone data. Because this was an incoming call, it is impossible to determine the location status. This point also goes for the next call. At 7:15 p.m, Adnan's cell phone receives an incoming call at Leakin Park. During this time, Adnan says he was at mosque. Jay testifies that Adnan took Hae's body to a shallow grave and he received a call where he spoke in English and Arabic. 8:05 p.m, Edmondson Avenue. Jen says she spoke to Jay around 8 p.m. as she had agreed to meet him at the Westview Mall. She went on to say that she saw Jay and Adnan arriving in Adnan's car. She picked up Jay and they left. Jen says once she picked up Jay, Jay would tell her about the murder. She says that Jay told her that Adnan had strangled Hae and showed him Hae's body in the trunk of Hae's car at Best Buy car park. Jen and Jay's statements do differ. Jen said she went to Westview Mall to pick up Jay and he and Adnan pulled up. So I'm not being funny, I don't think you'd forget where you were when your friend tells you about a murder. And Jen has 3 different versions of what happened after she picked up Jay. 1, she picks up Jay at Westview Mall and then they go back to Westview Mall to wipe down the shovels. Then they go to Stephanie's house. Stephanie's Jay's girlfriend, and then they go to Kathy's. 2, she picked up Jay from Westview, then they went to Stephanie's house, then back to Westview, and then to Kathy's. 3, she picks up Jay at Westview Mall, then Steph's, then they go to their friends Mike's birthdays, and then back to Kathy's. And Jay says after he and Adnan ditch Hae's car, he gets out of Adnan's car and goes home, where he calls Jen. He tells her that they need to talk, so she goes over to see him. And this is when he claims he told Jen about what happened. He took off his clothes and put them in a plastic bag, and then Jen would drive him to a dumpster where he would dispose of them. So yeah, their stories just did not match up. And also the cell phone locations didn't match up to Jay's star testimony. The two are so suspicious. Kathy says at 6:30, Jay and Adnan left hers. Then hours later, Jay returned with Jen, but Adnan was not with them. Stephanie says that she didn't speak to Jay until 11:30 p.m. on the 13th of January. So this doesn't match up to what Jen or Jay has said. They claim that they were with her at 8:30 p.m. till 9:30 p.m. The phone records show at 9:01 p.m. Adnan's cell phone called Natisha, who claims they spoke to Adnan and not Jay. So while Adnan's phone was apparently in Leakin Park for 2 hours, not a single phone call was made to any of his contacts. Perhaps Jay had his phone and not Adnan. From 9:01 p.m. onwards, Adnan's cell phone stayed around his house area. During this time, it would have been in his possession. So the cell phone evidence that the prosecutors heavily relied on didn't really prove that Adnan had his phone, and it didn't prove that Jay and Jen were credible. Point 2. Lack of physical evidence. As we know, Adnan was convicted based on circumstantial evidence and Jay Wilde's testimony, which is questionable. In 1999, DNA was collected, but it was never tested. So 20 years after Hae's murder, the evidence was finally tested. There were 12 items tested, which included fingernail clippings, a liquor bottle, a condom wrapper, and blood samples, but none proved to match Adnan. A female DNA profile was found on a piece of rope near where Hae's body was buried, but whoever that belonged to was not on a system, meaning they have never been booked by the police. Also, the testing of Hae's fingernails clippings showed no match to Adnan. The prosecutors believe that Hae was strangled in her car. So if there was a struggle in Hae's car, it would be likely that the assailant's DNA would be under her fingernails or somewhere in her car. So with all the testing, neither Jay's or Adnan's DNA was found on any of the evidence. So if two high school students actually did commit the crime, they would have been really smart to be able to get rid of all of the evidence. Point 3. Jay's story doesn't add up. I have spoken quite a bit about Jay and his story, so I'm going to go through this point quickly. Jay's story didn't add up. He changed it multiple times and he also contradicted himself. Also, in Jay's police interview, it is said that the police asked him leading questions and there was little input from Jay. Many people believe that the police actually coached Jay with his answers. One vital and shady bit of evidence that Jay may have been lying is the fact that he said that Adnan showed him Hae's body when they were at Best Buy car park. Then he changed that to Kathy's house. Now he's admitted it was actually his nan's house, so he just wasn't a reliable witness. Point 4. No witnesses can place Adnan and Hae together in her car after school. The prosecutors believe that Hae was murdered by Adnan between 2:15 and 3 p.m. They say he caught a ride from her after school around 2:15 p.m. and then he would strangle her sometime after that. Then he'll call Jay, who has his cell phone, while he was in the Best Buy parking lot around 2:30 p.m. and he would ask Jay to pick him up. However, multiple witnesses say that Hae was still on the school campus until 3 p.m. Apparently she was at school gym talking to a friend from 2:30 to 2:45 p.m. and then she was still in the school gym speaking to another friend at 3 p.m. but had to rush off to buy a drink and pick up her cousin, and at 3:15 p.m. she didn't show up at her cousin's school. And there were no witnesses that say they saw Adnan with Hae during this time. Point 5. Adnan maintains his innocence. Adnan was offered a plea deal that would have meant he would have been released from prison in November 2018. And before the state made the offer, Adnan considered accepting it. But his mum asked, "Why would you plead guilty to something you didn't do?" Adnan said at first he wanted to prove his innocence, but over time, almost 20 years, he just wanted to get out of prison. So in 2018, the prosecutor made him an offer, meaning he would have to plead guilty and serve 4 more years. If he had accepted it, he would have been released in 2022. But he didn't, and he said what the state had offered was so bad it was unreasonable. And he did not want to admit to guilt because he stands by his innocence. So maybe if Adnan was guilty, he would just be like, okay, I'll admit to it, and then at least I'm going to get out of prison. But him standing by his innocence, maybe that can be interpreted that he didn't actually commit the crime. So where is Adnan now? So he's been in prison since he was 18 years old and he is now around 40. And despite being in prison, he was married, but he later got divorced. He's said to be an upstanding inmate, rarely getting himself into any type of trouble. So 3 years after Adnan's conviction in 2003, Adnan tried to appeal his conviction, but with no luck. And in 2010, he moved for a post-conviction relief. He claimed that his defence attorney did not represent him adequately by not questioning Asia McClain. And in 2014, his appeal was initially denied. But in February 2015, the Maryland Court of Special Appeals approved his application, and a judge ordered for a post-conviction relief proceeding to see if Adnan was eligible for a new trial. And things were looking hopeful for Adnan. In 2016, a new trial was granted. But in 2019, Adnan was denied a new trial by the higher-ups in the Maryland Court of Appeals. So with that, Adnan's defence team took to the Supreme Court, but they refused to consider his appeal in 2019. And it actually refused to elaborate why the justices refused to hear his appeal. So as of now, Adnan would have served over 20 years in prison, and there is no sight of a new trial on the horizon. And his team are committed to overturning his conviction, but it will not be easy. So, if Adnan Syed is innocent like he claims, that begs the question, who could have killed Hae? Let's quickly run through some popular theories. Many people believe that Jay Wilde was the real murderer, because he knew exactly where Hae's abandoned car was. People have suggested that Hae threatened to tell the police that Jay was a drug dealer, or Hae may have caught him cheating on his girlfriend Stephanie, who was her friend, and Jay just wanted to keep Hae quiet. They believe that he took advantage of the fact that Adnan had loaned him his car and his cell phone, and used Adnan's phone to frame him. And Jay was a real person who was calling Nisha. Jay did this so he can pin it all on Adnan and make himself just an accessory to the murder. Some have also suggested that Adnan actually hired Jay to kill Hae, but none of these theories have any proof. They are all speculation. A lot of people have suggested that Jay's friend Jen was heavily involved in Hae's murder, either helping Jay to kill her or disposing of her body. And some have suggested that they may have secretly been dating behind Stephanie's back, and maybe Hae caught them together after school on January the 13th, or just caught them together another day, so they killed her to keep her quiet. But I think that sounds really far-fetched. Another popular theory is that Don killed Hae. Some say this because of his alibi. His manager was his mum, and he said he worked from 9 AM to 6 PM, but the timesheet had a completely different employee's ID number on it. So this definitely raises a few questions. People say that his motivation would have been he was jealous that Hae may still have had feelings for Adnan, so he acted out of rage or revenge. But again, there is no proof or any physical evidence to tie Don to the crime. But hey, there's also no evidence to tie Adnan to the crime. So there you go. Also, a few months before Hae's body was found, another body of an 18-year-old student from Woodlawn High School was found in a wooded area. And at the time the police found Hae's body, there was no suspect for the other crime. But in 2002, they tested the DNA of Roy Davis and it matched. And some people believe that he may have also killed Hae because the crimes were so similar. Both victims were strangled and left in a wooded area. And both victims were last seen driving their cars. They both probably drove past Liberty Road where Roy lived, but there was a significant difference. The other victim was sexually assaulted and Hae was not. There's also speculation about the guy who found Hae's body, because his story was really weird. He left work to get the tools from his house, but he stopped to have a pee, even though he was really close to his destination. He also failed 2 polygraph tests. He was asked if he was attempting to withhold any information about Hae's death and he failed. And many people believe that he was somehow involved in Hae's murder. But polygraphs are not reliable. And if he was involved, why would he tell the cops? They had no idea where Hae's body was, so he could have just pretended he didn't know anything and would have just got off scot-free. But honestly, who bloody knows? So there you go. Those are all my facts on the case, but I mean, there's so much information out there, I've had to strip it down. And if you think I've left out anything that's really important, please do comment down below because I will read it. I would also love to know your opinion on whether you think Adnan is guilty or he is indeed innocent. Do you believe that this is a miscarriage of justice because that does happen, or do you think they've got the right guy? I'd love to know your thoughts. Tune in next time for my next episode of The Dilemma, where I will be talking about Stephen Avery. And yes, you've definitely heard of him before, because his case became really popular after Netflix's Making of a Murderer. I hope you've enjoyed this video. If you have, don't forget to like, comment and subscribe to help me out. Bye for now.